Luan Oliveira is the Rice Krispies of flat ground skating. As you can see from his snap, crackle, and pop. Historically speaking, Luan is responsible for pulling in the biggest viewership numbers on YouTube for the Barracks in their flat ground tournament, significantly dwarfing the rest of the field under the same metric. The Brazilian flat ground Ripper's signature combination of speed, pop, humility, and loyal fan following from his fellow countrymen are key contributors in what drive clicks to battles with his name attached. Oliveira has never lost a match in round 1, and as he currently competes in his 7th season, Luan is joined only by Shane O'Neill as the skater with the most completed seasons to never lose a round 1 match. As for round 2 battles, Luan did lose one match against the season 4 runner-up PJ Ladd, but has never lost a second round game since, something even Shane can't claim. The only 2 round 3 losses for Luan were to either returning champions or the eventual champion. First in season 8 when the reigning title holder Cody, in perhaps one of the best round 3 matches in the tournament's history, where Luan did his switch 540 and appeared to have the game in the bag, but Cepeda just wouldn't die, and eventually came back, while the other round 3 loss was in season 10 when Jocelyn couldn't be stopped. Season 12 was the only season where the bracket housed a 4th round before finals night, and Luan lost that game remotely, so you could argue that his FaceTime game against Seva isn't quite the same as the other losses. Luan's only other loss was in the Season 7 championship game against a then invincible Cody Cepeda. Excluding PJ's 78.13% win-loss record, Luan is second amongst fellow skaters who are in the top 10 of most battles completed, at 77.27% out of 22 games played. And 22 games played ranks him 8th amongst the most battles ever completed by a single skater in the tournament. In other words, Luan is not only the most watched skater in Battle at the Barracks, but he's one of the most successful in terms of bracket progression. So how do you beat someone like Luan Oliveira in a flat ground game of skate? As usual, in order to establish control of the game and dictate which tricks Luan will need to land, winning roshambo is the first checkpoint to clear. Luan heavily favors throwing paper, making that choice nearly 60% of all 27 roshambo throws. Rock is Oliveira's second most common choice at 26%, but he's lost 6 out of 7 of the rocks he's thrown, with the only win from Rock coming on a second throw that I'd argue he wasn't even going to choose given the remote context of the battle he had with Deshawn. Scissors is last at 3 throws total, with one of them being a win early in his career. Then of course there's the dreaded 1-of-1 coin toss against Seva, which he lost after calling heads.
Heads, please.
Tail.
If Luan heavily favors paper, one strategy could be to also throw paper, and since he's never thrown scissors on a second throw, you could throw paper again, hoping he'll choose rock. But given Oliveira's fairly diverse choice portfolio and tendency to choose paper on the second throw, a third throw with Luan is uncharted territory, so your guess as to what to throw is as good as mine. You could also hope that Luan will avoid rock, given his 6 losses out of 7 throws with rock. Therefore, he favors paper, and try to clinch a win on the first throw with scissors. Whatever you do, I would not throw rock because of Luan's tendency to favor paper. So if you're asking me, scissors would be my first choice against Luan in roshambo. Next, you need to choose which tricks to set that will have the highest likelihood of Luan missing, which requires looking at his historical defensive performance. Defense in Battle at the Barracks is a position that skaters face on average 47% of the time, and because of Luan's almost 90% offensive consistency, which is 16% higher than the average skater's offensive consistency, Oliveira has only spent 42.67% of his turns defending. On defense, Luan is 77% consistent against tricks that are historically only 62.5% consistent. So on average, the tricks he's landing on defense 7.7 times out of 10 are the same ones that most skaters are only landing 6.2 times out of 10. Some notable examples of Luan's defensive strengths include the tray double flip, which he's landed 2 out of 2 times for a clean record, but only 23% of defenders land this trick on average in the tournament. Or the nollie late flip, which Luan is also 2 out of 2 on defense, but the average defensive consistency is 30%. Perhaps most impressive is Luan's 5 for 5 record on switch backside big spins, which are only 45% consistent on defense historically. These are tricks you want to avoid setting because Luan's track record suggests he'll be landing these if he is on defense. So in order to strategically choose the tricks most likely to mess up Luan, you'll want to look at what are his lowest defensive percentages. Compare them to the tournament's rates, and choose the tricks he's missed most frequently that skaters tend to land defensively. There are 9 tricks Oliveira has only tried one time on defense that he did not land. And a couple like the fakey frontside big spin and nollie tray flip have relatively high historically successful defensive rates. But we want to look at single tricks he's missed more than once to increase our odds of giving Luan a letter. The switch inward heel flip was missed twice because it was a death blow against PJ, but Luan's never attempted it offensively, so maybe a switch inward can go on your list. This is also the case for the switch front 3 shove death blow against Jocelyn in Season 10, where Oliveira missed that trick twice in his attempt to avoid letter E. Oliveira is 0 for 2 on laser flips, once in Season 11 and even earlier in Season 4, but the trick has a 37% defensive success rate. In addition to the aforementioned switch inward heel flip, Luan has only defended 1 regular inward heel flip and missed 2. And apart from 1 offensive half cab inward heel flip, Oliveira has never set any other inward heel flip variation. You might be well off to sharpen your inward heel flip game against Luan. Any trick with a 540 in it appears to be a problem for Oliveira defensively, with 1 very clutch fakey 5 shove being the only make out of 3 attempts, and the 540 shove it being 0 for 4. In general, Luan's weakest stance defensively is switch, with his average consistency at 63.24% compared to fakey, nollie, and regular, all 3 of which are sitting around the mid-70s range. Out of all the trick variation types, Luan struggles most with shove variations, indicated by his 60% defensive consistency. Another question mark for Luan are impossibles. He's only got 1 offensive switch impossible in the books, and upon review, it's not actually an impossible, but a 3 shove. Since Luan's got no history with impossibles, someone like Jamie Griffin, who is comfortable with that trick, could front load some letters on Oliveira using variations of that maneuver. There are some other cases that I came across, this one in particular in Luan's match against Felipe in Season 10, where the Barracks called it a switch impossible, but when I reviewed the trick, his back foot does detach from the tail, which is what I would consider differentiating a trick between an impossible versus a shove it, and because of that, I did not log this trick as a switch impossible, but instead a switch 360 pop shove it. From what we're seeing with Luan's defensive stats, cherry-picking some potential sore spots like variations of inward heel flips, 5 shoves, and impossibles could help to give a couple letters. But keep in mind, Oliveira is one of the best defensive flat ground skaters, second in defensive consistency only to PJ in the veteran circle. So don't be surprised when your intentionally chosen offensive tricks don't do much damage. One other thing to keep in mind with Luan, especially when attempting to take him down in an early battle where he chooses to exert a lot of energy skating fast and popping hard, is to consider the importance of exhausting Oliveira with a high volume of basic tricks. It could be theorized that when a game of skate is longer, the likelihood of a smaller margin of victory increases, meaning that shorter games will tend to be closer to 0 turnover skunks, while battles with more turnovers increases the odds of both skaters getting letters and heading closer towards the T-to-T barn burner direction. With Luan, the average match length of his 22 battles is 63 turns. And a visual representation of match length versus margin of victory shows that, apart from a few outliers, almost a full quarter of his 22 battles were short and skunk matches. most notably in Season 7 Round 2 when he scared the shit out of Chan with his presence and ended the game in 21 turns. One of the exceptions to this rule, with Luan at least, is his first round Season 7 match against Tanner Lawler, where their battle could be looked at as two distinctly separate games. Split in half when Lawler almost got Luan to letter E, but his switch late flip attempt miss gave Luan control to essentially start a whole new game on his terms, ultimately ending in Oliveira's favor, but still technically a T-to-T barn burner. Luan's two longest games were late in the tournament of Season 11, where the barracks significantly reduced the square footage allotted for skaters to perform flat ground so that a live audience can observe the battle, in turn forcing Oliveira to speed check himself throughout the game, and whether he knew it or not, actually helped him conserve energy and hang in long enough to secure his eventual championship title against Jocelyn. It doesn't take a team of rocket scientists to figure out that going this fast and popping this hard on tricks can have diminishing returns. It's true that whether Luan does this intentionally or not, his exaggerated speed and pop height have the potential to be a double-edged sword, because that style of skating will undoubtedly intimidate his opponent at least a little bit, obligating them to attempt to replicate his effort levels, but skating that hard can also eventually wear Oliveira out. Luan's longest game outside of a finals night was his 86-turn Season 8 Round 2 battle against Season 4 champ Morgan Smith. At one point late in that battle, Berra told Luan to slow down and take a rest because he was darting around the warehouse like a bat out of hell.
Take a rest, it's okay, you don't have to do it.
And similar to Lawler's match a season prior, Morgan had already chiseled Luan down to T before missing a cab heel flip. Oliveira's hard flip variations would ultimately take down Morgan, but if Luan was facing someone like Diego, who's known for landing all types of hard flip variations, the extraneous effort from the Brazilian could have backfired eventually. It's all speculation because the unmeasurable quality of willing yourself to win when you're cornered with letter T seems to be a trait that Luan also possesses, on top of all his aforementioned strengths. But figuring out a way to prolong your offensive control against Luan, earlier in the tournament when the warehouse is wide open and he wastes his limited energy on going above the speed limit and popping unnecessarily high, will potentially be your only hope to make an impact offensively. Finally, it's time to look at Luan's offensive strengths in order to be aware of where he inflicts the most damage while setting tricks. After taking Oliveira's most consistent offensive tricks and comparing the difference with the tournament's least consistent defensive moves, Luan's clearly benefited from setting hard flip variations. He's nearly 100% offensively consistent with both fakie hard flips and the half cab variation, while on defense both tricks are only 40% successful on average. 18 out of 19 for fakie hards and 14 out of 15 on half cab hards are a strong indication that Luan is very comfortable with hard flips in fakie stance, not to mention the regular hard flip, which Luan is 100% 14 for 14, while the tournament's average defense is less than 60% consistent on that trick. Oh yeah, and nollie hard flips too. Oliveira's 8 for 8 with those offensively, and only 46.5% of defenders land it. It also appears Luan's 4 for 4 on switch hard flips, and that trick is only 55% defensively successful in the tournament's history. So it's overwhelmingly safe to say that anyone who wants to survive a game of skate against Luan Oliveira is not going to be able to slouch on their hard flip practice. Even more potent than hard flip variations, Luan's switch tray revert is 83% offensively consistent out of 12 attempts, but less than 25% defensively successful. So that's another trick anyone skating against Oliveira would want to spend some time on. In conclusion, beating Luan Oliveira in a game of skate at the barracks requires winning roshambo by throwing scissors, setting his weakest tricks defensively, including inward heel flip variations, 5 shoves and flips, and favoring switch shove tricks in general to capitalize on his weakest stance and trick variation type. The final action item to complete in preparing to compete with Luan would be to strengthen your hard flip variations in all stances, particularly fakie, switch tray reverts, Rick flips, and in order to have the most success in defending Oliveira's strongest offensive tricks. Both Cody Cepeda and Chris Joslin are the only skaters still in Season 13 who can claim they have beaten Luan, and unlike Joslin, Cody has never lost to Luan. So there are still skaters in the bracket who have first-hand experience giving Oliveira letter E. And dudes like Jamie and Tyler on the same side of the bracket as Luan will potentially face him in round 3, given Oliveira takes care of business against Leo Romero. 37.5% of the 16 first-round battles in Season 13 were statistical upsets when comparing ELO rankings before the match, with Mason Silva's loss to Malto being the biggest upset between each skater's score. But considering that a K9 was used to fill the reffing duties, that game shouldn't be taken too seriously, because if it had, Mason likely would have tried and won. Luan's absolute annihilation of Lucas Rebello was the most accurate prediction from ELO, with their 25-turn battle ending only 1 turn later than Season 13's shortest game between Andy and Tori. Looking ahead to round 2, ELO hints that the right side of the bracket is responsible for housing Season 13's strongest skaters, led by Jamie Griffin's 1525. Simulating a round 2 completion using ELO figures alone gives us a combination of some questionable realities and some very likely outcomes. For example, the right side of the bracket seems almost like a guarantee of Jamie versus Luan and Chris versus Tyler in round 3. But the left side of the bracket is a toss-up. Out of 429 total matches, ELO is 71% accurate in predicting winners, with the stipulation that at least one skater is not in their first ever match. So accounting for that nearly 30% margin of error, I'm guessing that the 1 in 3 chance of an upset will fall on the left side of this bracket. Pretty much all of these round 2 battles on the left side are a question mark in my mind, but Andy Anderson and Chris Cole are what I would argue are the 2 skaters with the most potential for flipping the script. Cole has nothing really to prove at this point, so his competitive drive might not be turned on against Carlos in round 2, which could end up with Ribeiro getting the ELO upset. And God knows what Andy and his love for attention will lead to in the most unpredictable match on the left side of the bracket. Levi and John have almost identical situations. Their ELO scores are the closest in all of round 2 at only an 18-point difference. They're both international skaters coming from Fight Tonight, and they're both skating in their second ever battle at the Barracks. So while I personally chose Levi as the winner, this battle is one that could truly go either way. In closing, the absolute stand-up gentleman over at Slap had the impressive attention to detail in catching a rather enjoyable typo over on the Barracks website regarding Mason and Malto's battle.